Today, I want to talk to you about a little editing project I did based on my love of Star Wars. I was born and raised on Star Wars, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. When the prequels came out, I had a love-hate relationship with them, as did many. Then George Lucas announced he was selling the property to Disney. There was a new hope for Star Wars. Then the time came for the newest entry in the saga of all sagas to come out, and it was glorious. The Force Awakens was a shiny new adventure with all new characters and a very familiar story, but I didn't care. I loved it. Then the second of the Disney Star Wars saga graced the world with its presence, and things seemed to be slipping towards the dark side for the franchise. Ridiculous plot points, total disregard for what came before, and it really made me long for the days of the prequels. The Last Jedi left me with so little left to love about this new trilogy that I almost forgot the third movie was coming out. I don't know if it was because The Last Jedi beat my expectations down so low, but I kind of enjoyed The Rise of Skywalker for the most part. Daggers and all. That being said, I didn't hate the Disney Star Wars trilogy. In fact, I loved parts of it, even The Last Jedi, but I couldn't get past the bad parts, so I took it upon myself. There are great movies in here somewhere, and I wanted to find them. I know Star Wars fans are a rabid bunch of people, and they will chew you up and spit you out if they don't like what you're doing, so let me be very clear. I'm not pretending that my edits of these movies are the end-all, be-all Disney Star Wars trilogy. I didn't make these cuts to make money or to distribute DVDs around the world, so please don't ask. I didn't reinsert any deleted scenes, I only tried to fix what was there originally.
What are you doing?
I only recut these films as a way to review these movies and to show what a slight tweak to a very questionable scene can do to make a film better. To me, The Force Awakens was nearly a perfect movie, with the exception of the fact that it's a retread of A New Hope. Oh, and the Starkiller base is pretty stupid too, but whatever. Unfortunately, I couldn't remove Starkiller base without affecting the overall storyline, so I left it in. In fact, I barely made any changes to The Force Awakens at all. The only real change I made to this film is very subtle.
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
I felt that the big Emperor reveal in The Rise of Skywalker was very abrupt and came out of left field, so one of my main goals for this recut was to throw slight hints to the Emperor's existence in this trilogy. The scene in question is where Rey finds Luke's old lightsaber. She begins to have hallucinations, and there are already a ton of sound hits and fan service here. So when she's been pulled by Unkar Plutt, if that's what his name is, something like that. After her parents leave her on Jakku, I just added a little hint of the Emperor's theme music.
Quiet, girl.
The Last Jedi required quite a bit more tweaking. This film is probably the most divisive film in the Disney trilogy, so I'm sure a lot of you watching this will disagree with my changes. But again, this recut is only for me, so... One of the hardest parts about doing this is there was so much I wanted to cut out that it wouldn't have made any sense.
So we blow that one up. I like where your head's at, but no.
So I had to keep a lot of offensive material in the movie, even though I strongly disagreed with most of it. For example,
they won't last long burning fuel like this.
Running out of gas in space is not really possible because once you are set on a trajectory in space, you don't stop.
Fleet's only got 18 hours of fuel left.
Ever. Also, I always thought it would have been much better if Leia was more present in the film instead of just being in a coma for most of the runtime. She could have died saving the Resistance near the end instead of purple hair lady.
Thank you, Commander.
In fact, I'm not even really sure why she's in this movie anyway. I had to refine my changes down to just make the movie tolerable, and a little more serious by taking out some of the more cartoony or Looney Tunes humor, which felt very out of place in a Star Wars movie. Sure, Star Wars has humor, but not shooting tens of thousands of coins out of BB-8 humor. That made no sense. It pulled me right out of the movie every time there was a bad joke like this. My first change has to do with this Looney Tunes type of comedy. When Poe is flying his X-Wing, he gets hit and the weapon systems go down, so BB-8 has to retreat down into the bowels of the ship to repair it. Then for some reason, sparks shoot out from different places as BB-8 tries to plug them. What I did was cut the scene right as BB-8 is getting ready to plug the first spark.
No, damn it! BB-8, my weapon systems are down. We gotta take out that last cannon or our bombers are toast. Work your magic, buddy.
autocannon's prime!
I think this makes the scene a lot more serious as BB-8 is just doing his job. Later in the scene, BB-8 originally had his hands full and then headbutts the sparks, and that somehow works. It fixes the ship. So again, I cut out the silliness.
Let's go, BB-8! It's now or never!
I had his arm come out once and fix the problem. He still gets shocked here, but that's understandable. Now BB-8 is efficient and not just a silly, lucky droid.
Resistance bombers approaching.
Of course they are.
One thing that always really bothered me about the scene with the bombers, and it's not just that gravity doesn't exist in space. Leia calls Poe and tells him to call off the attack.
Disengage now, Commander. That is an order.
Poe refuses and decides to turn off his communicator instead and continue the attack, resulting in the destruction of all of the bombers. The fleet taking a hit is not what bothers me, but it was that Leia, being the general, would have simply called all the ships back herself. So I asked myself, what would happen if you take her order out?
The last transport's in the air. The evacuation is complete.
These things are fleet killers!
Wipe that nervous expression off your face, 3PO.
Well, I will certainly try, General. Nervous.
The scene still plays the same. Her disapproval is all over her face. She's still pissed at Poe for not making the right choice as the squadron leader, resulting in the deaths of dozens of Resistance fighters.
We need to get you dressed. Come on.
Finn is one of the missed opportunities in this movie.
Where's Ray?
His character is so well set up in the first film that his presence in the second movie feels like a giant letdown.
That's disgraceful.
First of all, I understand that expectations can somehow ruin a movie-going experience if those expectations are not realized, and that has plagued the Star Wars prequel trilogy and sequel trilogy. But man, Finn really got the shaft in this case. In The Force Awakens, when his back is slashed at the end, and he's badly injured, I pictured a scenario where he would possibly have to face a world in which he might be paralyzed, and have to make a real choice between the First Order, who could potentially fix his wound with the best technology, or the Resistance. Maybe give him a real emotional arc about having to come to terms with his handicap and do what's right. Instead, he just falls out of his medical bed with a slide whistle sound effect, and then he's fine? Here's how a simple cut can change a scene drastically. And of course, I got rid of Poe talking about Finn being naked and leaking or something like that.
Finn, naked, leaking bag? What? Did you fry a chip?
Now we finally get to Luke Skywalker. The way this beloved character was treated is beyond comprehension.
I failed you, Ben.
But we'll get into that a little more later. I actually liked that Luke was a hermit, that he had sacrificed his life for a belief that the Jedi are not the way.
It's time for the Jedi to end.
Watching The Last Jedi for the first time, I could sense something was very wrong in this scene. The way Luke tosses the lightsaber over his shoulder was basically a giant middle finger to The Force Awakens. I had heard that another editor on YouTube cut this scene to where Luke hands the lightsaber back to Rey, so I thought I'd give it a try. Again, I only used what I had, so it's a little rough, but it's a lot better. As Rey is trying to get Luke to acknowledge her, originally we cut to Porgs playing with the lightsaber, which was a pretty cute scene, but since I cut Luke tossing the laser sword away carelessly, I also had to lose the porgs. This was a little tricky because I didn't have a shot to show Rey sitting down, so it cut a little weird. I grabbed this overhead shot of the island from later and put it here to create the passage of time. Then with a little sad Skywalker music, it brings the whole scene together.
Master Skywalker. I'm from the Resistance. Your sister Leia sent me. We need your help. Hello?
Go away.
Here is arguably the most disturbing scene to grace a Star Wars film. When Luke drinks the blue milk from the weird creature's boobies? This scene confused me, and it goes so far that I'm not sure why Rian Johnson didn't just have Luke drink directly from the teat. It's so disgusting and belongs nowhere near this movie, so that's where I put it. The scene is so pointless that you can't even tell it's gone.